Good evening, everyone. My name is John Tiggs, and I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that McNally Robinson is located here in Treaty 1 territory. That's the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, in the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Brewstertown. We are so delighted that you could all join us here tonight, both in person and virtually, for a return visit from Terry Fallis, to which you may applaud. We're so grateful to McClelland Stewart for helping to make this evening a possibility, and of course for publishing his latest book, A New Season, which will be the topic we're discussing this evening. I won't take up too much of your time. I just do a few quick preliminary notes about procedure, and then I'll turn things over to the people you're really here to listen to. So there'll be a brief reading from up here following an introduction of Terry Fallis. After that, there'll be a conversation that'll take place at the seats to my left. After that, there'll be an opportunity for you people to ask questions. So if you are here in the space and have a question, please just put up your hand and I'll run over to you with this microphone. Not to comment on your ability to project, just to ensure that those watching at home can hear the question. And if you are one of those people joining us on YouTube, please feel free to write any questions you might have into the chat, and we'll put them to the author as time permits. I'll have some adrenaline-packed notes on the signing procedure for you at the end of the event, but the only thing I'll put in your brain right now is that we'll ask you all just to remain in place for one moment at the close of the night while we safely transport our author to the table beside the cash desk.
Is there a chair or something to get a stretcher maybe?
A litter or a fireman can be. It's hard to believe, but it's been over 10 years since we've had the pleasure of welcoming Terry Fallis back to our atrium. At that point, only his books, The Best Laid Plans and The High Road, were available, but he already had die-hard fans here in the city. When we realized we would be welcoming him back, we were overjoyed and quickly thought, who can we get to speak to him? And luckily, Winnipeg has its own Terry Fallis expert named Deborah Bowers, who has been reviewing his books for the Winnipeg Free Press for years. We couldn't be happier to have her on board to speak to him tonight. She'll be introducing him in just a moment, but for now, here is her official bio. Host Deborah Bowers began writing short stories as a child using her grandma's typewriter. She became a published writer as a teenager and currently writes occasional book reviews and other features for the Winnipeg Free Press. Professionally, she has several years of experience in marketing and communications. Personally, she loves to travel and hates to cook. Deborah is Red River Métis. Please join me in welcoming Deborah Bowers.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for the lovely intro, John. As John mentioned, I'm Deborah Bowers, and even though I was introduced as somewhat of an expert on Terry Fallis, I'm here to tell you that it's my first time meeting him as well, so it's pretty exciting for me, just as it is for you to have Terry back in the city. I've been reading and reviewing his books, I guess, for over 10 years, so I essentially have read them all. And I've reviewed 8 of 9, actually. I didn't review the first book, but after reading his second book, I then went and quickly purchased the first one to just to make sure I understood where he started. So like you, I'm looking forward to learning about his latest book and what brought Terry to write about grief in A New Season, because it is somewhat of a departure from his previous work. And on that, just a bit of background on that work. So his first novel, The Best Laid Plans, won the Stephen Leacock Medal for Humour in 2008 and was the 2011 winner of CBC's Canada Reads. His next books, The High Road and Up and Down, were finalists for the Stephen Leacock Medal for Humour, and in 2015, he won the Leacock Medal for his 4th book, No Relation. His other novels include Poles Apart, One Brother Shy, Albatross, and Operation Angus. That's one of my favorites as well. Now, A New Season is his 9th novel, and it's the 2nd book he wrote during the pandemic, So some of us were certainly more productive than others during the pandemic. Since being released at the end of August, a new season has been doing really well on a variety of book reviews across the country, including CBC Canada Reads, CBC Books Canadian Fiction Bestsellers. It was at #1 at some point, and I understand it's still pretty near the top. So without further ado, please join me in giving Terry Fallis a warm Winnipeg welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Deborah, and thank you to John for what an awesome. You have any idea what a great job John does on these events? It's not easy. He makes it look easy. And what a gift it is for you to have this store in your midst. It's such a lovely store. And thank you for coming in such numbers. We Canadian novelists are somewhat unaccustomed to speaking to such large crowds as this. I'm not kidding, actually. I'm serious. This is a great turnout. I remember a reading I gave very early in my writing life, I think after my first novel, at the main branch of the Ottawa Public Library, which they have this cavernous lecture hall with tiered seating. It probably held about 300 people, and they had me in what they called the green room beforehand. Then they escorted me in, and I got to the podium, and I looked up, and I counted 6 people in front of me. And then I had the misfortune of looking even more closely, and I realized that 4 of them worked at the library. So you have outdone yourselves. Deborah mentioned that this is a bit of a departure for me, a new season, and it is. And I just confessed to her a minute ago, I don't want to take anything away from the questions that may be coming, that I only figured out, I think, why I wrote it after I wrote it. I just realized that we're in the midst of the pandemic. I think I was suffering isolation and concern the way many of us were. And I realized as this story began to emerge from my dubious brain pan that I needed to follow the story rather than do what I usually do, which is to bend the story to my will to create situations where I might make you laugh and hopefully think as well. But in this case, I didn't do that. I hope you will find it funny in many places, but there's also a bit more emotional range in this novel than I've had in my other novels. And I think it's because in the middle of the pandemic, as I was writing it, I kind of felt that I couldn't ignore the pandemic. In a way, I thought it would I wouldn't be honoring the frontline workers who ran towards the danger every day while we sequestered in our homes. And I didn't think it would honor those who had lost loved ones, and because so many of us did. So I decided just to take a page out of John Irving's handbook. John Irving, my favorite novelist. He says that he writes about that which scares him most. And what he never wants to happen to anyone he loves. And losing a spouse would probably be in that category. So I did that, and I hope you enjoy it, but it may be a bit different from my other novels. So why don't I just read you the first half of the novel? No, I won't do that. I'm going to do a very short reading. I don't want to read too much because I want you to discover the story on your own terms. But I'll just read the first page and a half, which I hope in a way captures the humor and the melancholy that runs through the novel. Now, you know me, though. You can count on me for a happy ending. There's a couple of gut punches early on, and then it's on an upwards trajectory for the remainder of the story. All right, chapter 1. Now that's using your face, Jack Mack, a spectator shouted as the buzzer sounded to end my weekly ball hockey game. To be clear, I actually knew who yelled from the sidelines, but let's just go with a spectator, shall we? Why encourage him? My teammates gathered around to congratulate me on the winning goal. Yes, it's true. For once, I was the hero. Let me give you the slow motion replay of my big moment in case you're blissfully unaware. And also because my clutch goal, spectacular though it was, did not make the highlight reel on SportsCenter that night. With the game tied in the final minute of play, I had assumed my position in front of the net to try to screen their goalie. The ball somehow found its way to one of our stronger defensemen back on the blue line. I watched him wind up for one of his terrifying slap shots as I trembled in the firing line. My mission, and I chose to accept it, was to try to deflect the ball to make it even tougher for their goalie to stop. Miraculously, the blade of my stick caught a piece of the orange plastic sphere as it whizzed towards the net at a speed that had me waiting for a sonic boom. It was sort of a good news, bad news, good news scenario. I did deflect the ball, good news, but right into my own face, bad news. That may sound painful, but for years I've worn a full wire cage on my helmet. Smart, right? So the ball bounced harmlessly off my well-protected face and into the net to win the game with about 2 seconds left on the clock. Good news again. It used to be that my ball hockey game was a high point of my week, which is saying something for a guy who had just about everything I could have ever desired. My life was nearly perfect. That all changed 2 years, 5 months, and 14 days ago. Despite it all, I still loved and needed my ball hockey and the roughly 90 guys who made up the 6 teams in our community league. In fact, I think I needed the game and the guys more than ever. You see, for an hour or so every week from April to October, my mind was completely and singularly focused on playing the sport I've loved since I was about 6 years old. Okay, let me spell it out. It was an escape. An escape for just a brief moment each week, but an escape nonetheless. It was only after the game and after the post-game analysis at our local watering hole that reality returned and settled over me like falling ash from a volcanic eruption. Why don't I just stop there? I should tell you this sort of a side note that I actually do play in the ball hockey league that is depicted in this novel. And at about 8 o'clock, when we're just ramping up, the ball will be dropping on the championship game, and our team is in the finals, and I am here. You might think that's bad news for the team, but maybe not. So I'm missing it. My twin brother who plays on the team with me, we're co-captains of the team. I'm sure he'll be texting me at certain points later on in the evening. But anyway, thank you for having me and come over and join Deborah. Okay.
Okay, we're good to go.
I think we are.
So just let us know when you get that text and then you
Yeah,
can
that's
report
right.
in on the score.
Well, I should tell you, we're probably not going to win. In the round robin portion of the playoffs, we were 0-5. We won 2 games all season. And then in the elimination rounds, the quarterfinals and the semifinals, we knocked off the 2 top seeds. Inexplicably. And so now we're playing the final game against a team. I think we may have beaten them once, but they're a very good team. But it doesn't matter. That's the thing about the league, not to preempt the questions, but by the next day, I barely remember who won the game. It's not really about the game. So.
Okay, that's okay, Terry, because I'm not terribly sportsy, so I don't have a lot of questions about the game. But here's the questions that I do have. So further to your brief intro and talking about grief, I wanted to explore that a little bit further. So that for those that aren't in the know, and apologies, I'm trying to use my iPhone and be all very hip rather than use paper and pen with my, so I'm not texting anyone, I'm literally looking at my notes. So for a new season, it was a departure, as we've discussed a little bit, from some of your usual topics, and to see you exploring grief. So I wondered if you could expound a little bit further on that, just about why you decided to write about grief at this time.
Sure. Well, those of you who have read some of my other novels may recognize that there's often grief and sadness in the novels. In fact, I think in my third novel, Up and Down, there's actually a death scene. You're there when his mother
That's right.
passes away. So I don't like to write a purely comic novel where you're just, laughing and chuckling your way through it, because life's not really like that. I think we do need the laughter, but as in life, I offset it with the realities that we confront as people growing older in our lives. But in this case, the balance is a little more even. It's probably more funny stuff in the other novels than sad stuff. There's a few moments where it's sad, but this one is a little bit, the beginning is tough, and it was tough to write, I must say. But as I sort of alluded to earlier, I think it was really the pandemic. I just felt that I couldn't ignore it. I just couldn't turn my back on it completely. I thought I'd be doing a disservice to those who had lost loved ones. And so I wanted to put it in. And so it really is the foundation of the novel in a way, because it's what sets the whole story in motion. And we've all confronted grief. There's probably not a single person in the room who has not confronted grief. I lost a younger brother when he was 18 years old in his first 2 weeks at Carleton University. Just couldn't be more ready to burst out of his shell and into full life, and then he was gone. Have any of you read the novel? A few of you have. I don't want to give too much away, but there is a scene in the novel where it's almost a voice from the grave. His wife, Annie, who has passed away 2.5 years before the novel opens, actually appears to him on a message, a recorded video on the phone that she entrusted in the care of their son, basically saying, if your dad is not back on his feet after a certain period of time, play this for him, sort of break glass in case of emergency, because she was so clear-eyed, she knew what was happening to her. And so she recorded this message where she basically says, don't let my death define your life. You need to be with someone. You're better with somebody. Go to Paris the way we planned, and find somebody. Giving him permission, a supremely selfless act. And people have said, well, where did that idea come from? And I got that idea from my mother, because when my mother passed, she was 68 when she passed away from breast cancer, and she was sort of in palliative care in the bedroom in our family house that my brother and I grew up in. And I was there with her in the 2 weeks before the end. And she, when no one else was there, she said to me, you're going to have to help your father find somebody. And so I took that idea and sort of twisted it a bit, but that's where that came from. So John Irving writing about what he fears most, and my mother were kind of responsible for that part of the story.
Sounds like your two greatest influences, perhaps.
Perhaps.
Well, mentioning Paris is a perfect segue to my next question.
That's why I did that.
He has not seen my iPhone. He does not know what I'm going to say. So you chose to have your protagonist, Jack McMaster, explore his feelings about grief and just to try to deal with that in the City of Light in Paris. So I have a two-part question, but you're welcome to, address any other aspects of Paris, because who doesn't love to talk about Paris? But just sort of wondering, my first question is, why did you choose Paris? And then related to that is, why Paris in the 1920s? A little bit about that fascination of the era.
Sure. Why don't I start with the latter part first? Those of you who know Paris will know that in the 1920s, it was a focal point of cultural revolution in the world, really, but particularly in Europe. The winds of change swept through Europe after the horrors of the Great War. And there was a great appetite for reform in everything. And there was cataclysmic, seismic changes going on in music, in painting, in dance, and certainly in literature. And the literature revolution was really sparked by writers like Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald and Morley Callahan, a Canadian novelist, and Gertrude Stein and Ford Madox Ford and Ezra Pound. They were known as the Lost Generation. And Gertrude Stein gave them that name. And Hemingway took the prose of the war era, which was very elegiac, very ornamented, flowing, complicated, long sentences, and he stripped it down to next to nothing. So much so that I don't actually like his writing. I know so much about Hemingway because I've researched him. I've been fascinated by his role in the cultural revolution of the time, but I don't like him as a person, and I don't like his writing. I hail from the YU's 6 words when 12 will do school of writing. I like to splash around in the English language, and Hemingway strips it right back. But I recognize what an important role, contribution he made to the changes in the literary landscape at the time. So when I became a writer, when my first novel came out, all of a sudden that era of 1920s Paris, and Paris was the epicenter of all these changes, largely because artists of all denominations flocked there because it was a very inexpensive city in which to live. That part has changed a little bit since then. So I became fascinated with Paris in the 1920s, and I have bookshelves and books upon bookshelves of books about Hemingway and Fitzgerald and all of their Paris years. I have a 1928 map of Paris framed sitting above my desk where I write. I passed on my passion for that era to Jack. And the first part of the question was just why Paris in general. Well, to me, and I wrote this in the novel, to me, Paris is a time machine. Because of the nature of Paris, the way it's built, the buildings, literally the buildings, it kind of means that it's very difficult for Paris to change physically. If someone wants to open up a Walmart in downtown Paris, they would literally have to negotiate with probably 36 cafe, restaurant, boutique owners, because they're all small little shops, before they could do it. And probably City Hall will not let them do it anyway. So you can go to Paris now and you walk the streets of the left bank the way I have every couple of years since the early 2000s. And it looks very much like it did a century ago, and probably always will. Sure, the cars are different, the fashions are different, but the buildings, you can put your hands up against the outer wall of Hemingway's apartment. You can feel his presence there. So that's why Paris, I think for me, the 1920s, and now you can still go there. And Les Deux Magots, the Dome, all of the cafes that Hemingway frequented, they are all almost exactly the same inside. The signs may be different now outside, but inside it's just the same, exactly the same. I've seen photographs of them all from the 20s, and now nothing has changed. So if you're interested in that era, it's neat to go and just I mean, I've written portions of my novels in those cafes, and it just, you can feel it. You can feel it.
Mhm. Well, it is a wonderful setting. I haven't been to Paris as often as you, by the sounds of it. I have been twice, once several years ago and once about 5 years ago. And we stayed in the Le Marais district.
Oh, sure. That's
And
lovely.
yeah, just that living in history. I understand. I think anyone who's been to Paris does. So it's also, I guess, a great pitch piece for if you haven't been to Paris,
Absolutely.
you should go. And I'm also laughing, Terry, because honestly, he hasn't seen my notes, but you kind of scooped my next question because it was about Ernest Hemingway. Because it was, I thought, just a hilarious part of your book in terms of what you think about his writing style. And it spoke to the writing geek in me because I also work in communications. And I'm currently using it, the app. It's called the Hemingway app.
Yes.
For plain language. And so when I read about the Hemingway piece, you know, as the character describes him in the novel, I had a really, really good giggle. So I won't go on to ask any further questions because you kind of addressed it. But suffice it to say, I very much enjoyed that piece, that part of it about why using 6 words when 12 it will do. Absolutely. So then back to Paris for a little bit. Now we've talked a little bit about Paris, about the importance of the place to you, about the 1920s, but there was something else that struck me about the story taking place there. And I wondered, is it that you're a romantic, or are you an optimist? Or do you simply love to travel and spend time in Europe? Is it all of the above? Like a little bit about the theme of romance and optimism. Yes, we explore grief, but there's so much more to the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's all of those things. Paris is a city of romance. It's a city of new beginnings. People arrive there with nothing, and much in the way that people often arrive in big cities, Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, Winnipeg. And they begin their life anew. And that happened in Paris. Paris is well known for that. But there is a romance about the city, if only from what went on in that city over the century or so that it's been it's been much more than a century, but my knowledge of it is sort of in the last century. But a very special place. And you can sit there in the Luxembourg Gardens, and which looks exactly the same now as it did back then, where Hemingway was purported to have captured pigeons to take home to Hadley so they had something to eat. I think that's an apocryphal story, but that is a story that comes up now and again. But yeah, it's if you've just been married and you were honeymooning in Paris or moving to Paris, that happened a lot. And something about the river, the Seine, the left bank, the right bank. I mean, it's just, well, you know, if you've been there, it's a pretty special place. Yeah.
But, and you really do capture the essence of the city, and that's one of your characters, and I really, really enjoyed that part of it.
Thanks.
So I'm looking at my notes, and this one you haven't scooped on me, so I'm good to go on this question. And you did touch on it actually in your intro, just about the Ball Hockey League and your friendships there. And that really struck me as well, especially as a woman, when reading a lot of your novels. Certainly most of your characters, a lot of the leads are men, right, what you know. But what jumped out for me this time around was not the Ball Hockey League, it was the friendships. It was those relationships that really helped Jack get through. And there's been so much said and written about toxic masculinity, especially in the last few years. And I wondered why you chose to include such positive male relationships in the story.
Well, that's a really good question. And I've always believed that women do friendships so much better than we men do. It seems to be a more natural, organic process without pretense. Guys, we're not as good at it. The only time you can have physical contact with your guy friend is if you're on the ball hockey court and they just score a goal. Then it's quite acceptable to, give them a quick hug or a tap on the helmet. But I'm learning as I get older that friendship is a really important part of our lives, and there aren't many novels that examines male friendship. I think there are quite a few great novels that look at women in friendship. So I use the Ball Hockey League as a vehicle for exploring friendship among men. And I'm writing in a way from firsthand experience. I promised Deborah that I would I'd probably say this a few times, that the novel, it sounds autobiographical. It's actually not. I'm not Jack. However, there's lots of things in the novel that I know about, because I like to write about worlds that I know and can write with authority and conviction and authenticity. So when I joined this Ball Hockey League that I've referenced already tonight, in 2003, I was 43 years old. And at that relatively advanced age, one does not expect all of a sudden to have gathered around him over the next few years, and now more than almost 20 years, a whole new circle of friends that have become important and close. And that was a real eye-opening experience for me. So, and there's a lot of hugging that goes on among these guys. So I've learned to get more physical and to hug my male friends. I had one friend in the league, when we greet each other, he hugs me, I hug him, and then quite often, maybe 2/3 of the time, he kisses me on the cheek. That was a bit different the first few times it happened. I'm kind of used to it now. But so we're getting better at that. And as we get older, I think we need that physical contact. So I'm far more ready to embrace my male friends, literally, if not in theory. So I wanted to write about that in the novel, and I've gone through a lot with these guys. And there have been funerals, parents' funerals, spouses' funerals, fellow players' funerals. I mean, you go back at our age, you go through that, and it draws a group of guys, particularly this group, closer together. So I kind of wanted to celebrate that. I wasn't. You make a good point about so much toxic masculinity, and I wasn't making a conscious blow against toxic masculinity. I was really trying just to capture why I thought male friendship was important, and we need to do better at it as guys.
Well, it really resonated with me. I did enjoy that part, and I realized too it wasn't a focus, but there was enough of a thread throughout, and the friendships that it just really struck me. I liked it. I liked it. I thought it was some good modeling of behavior, whether it was that intentional or not. Yeah, it was nice to see. And then switching gears to the female characters. So they were forces of nature. They were absolutely fascinating. Had me just a page turner in any time that Elizabeth Callahan Hughes happened to be on the page. I absolutely wanted to know what she was going to do next, what she was going to say, how much was it going to surprise me. Can you tell me a little bit about who inspired the creation of her character? Because she's just fabulous.
Yes, Callahan, as she's known in the novel, is somebody Jack meets when he goes to Paris, and I must say I'm in love with her.
I am too.
I think she's I love her character, and really she sprung from the notion that I wanted him to meet somebody who was completely unlike his wife. Well, they're very different, the two. The woman who he lived with for 36 years and suddenly is gone from his life. I didn't want him to, go searching for someone in her image to just replace her. Because I've never been a believer that, we only have one soulmate on the earth. I think I don't think that's right. I think we could have, there are others out there we could meet and fall in love with and be very happy with. And I thought he could do that too. So Elizabeth Callahan Hughes, Callahan in the novel, is very much a free spirit. She says what's on her mind. She has a lot of fun. She's spontaneous. A favorite part for me is when at one point, shortly after they meet, she asks him, "How old are you?" And he says, "Oh, well, I'm 62. And she says, no, you misunderstood me. I'm not asking you how many years you've walked this planet. I said, how old are you?" Which was an interesting concept. And those of us who are getting older, this is the first time I've written a narrator who's my own age, which tells you how old I think I am. All of my narrators have been younger. And I'm still coming to grips with the fact that I am now 63 and about to turn 64. Okay, nobody even dropped dead in a faint when I said that. So I'm part of the reason I wrote this novel was to help me come to grips with being older than I feel like I actually am. But Callahan has that same idea. And Annie, the dearly departed spouse, she's a high-powered mergers and acquisitions lawyer. She was, and a very loving person, but not very different from Callahan.
Mhm.
And I just thought it would be a cliche if he all of a sudden got engaged to, or not engaged to, I meant engaged with a woman who was very much like his wife. I didn't want to do that. So I tried to create a character that was just as loving and smart as Annie was, but in a completely different way. And I had fun. I had fun creating that character. I don't think I even know anybody quite like her, but I
Okay.
would sure like to meet.
I
sure
would
like to
too.
meet her.
Yeah, she's an absolutely fascinating character. I'm so glad you did create her. And I'm curious too, with that character, what about the grandmother, the Constance Stanley character? Is that based on anyone as well, or again, a figment of your imagination that just
Yes.
came to life?
Yeah, just for those who haven't read the novel, Callahan is an artist, and she lives in an apartment that was bequeathed to her, quite a spacious, beautiful apartment that was bequeathed to her by her grandmother, who, when her grandmother was 18 years old, English, from England, a very wealthy family, and she was a rebellious child, very rebellious. And she wanted to spend the summer in Paris when she was 18. And her parents, they were quite happy with her to go to Paris for the entire summer. And they did what rich families of that time did. Instead of putting her up in a hotel, they bought her an apartment. And she was an aspiring poet, and her goal was to insinuate herself into the lost generation of poets and writers and artists of the era. So she arrived in Paris at the age of 18 in the early 1920s. And so and she kept a diary. And you get a few diary entries. I wish I should have written more diary entries from her, I think. I had 2 in there, and then the publisher, my editor said, come on, let's get another one. Let's have a little bit more of Constance, because I loved her spirit too. And
Yes.
as she describes it, her wiles and guile that helped her make her way in Paris. So there's a bit of a mystery in the novel as well, which I had fun cooking up. Am I taking the next question now?
No, you're good.
Okay.
You're good.
So the diaries, there's a strange very cryptic entry in one of the diaries that makes, I won't even describe it to you, but it's in code. And when the code is cracked, it reveals an interesting relationship that she had It reveals a secret diary that is found. And I loved writing that part too. So it was kind of fun doing that. Because it was my way of talking a bit about the lost generation writers of the era, but through Constance's eyes.
Yes, there is a wonderful mystery to solve for those who haven't read it yet. Absolutely. Well, thank you for telling me about Constance. Because I was wondering about her creation, was she based on your grandma, your mom, or how she came to be? So
it's probably unavoidable that she was not based on, even subconsciously, on older women I have known. It's one of my things in my novels. I often like to have older women playing important roles in the stories, because generally in Canadian literature, older women often get cast aside. And I've been on a mission from my first novel onwards to try and strike a blow against that and to give older women prominent roles. So.
Absolutely succeeded on that, Terry. And looking at my notes here, so we do have our ongoing mind meld, as you did touch on it, of course, is just your age and perhaps the character's age, of course, not based on your life, not at all. But you do have a running bit in a new season with the main character who seems concerned about his age, but is making notes about, well, this, I might feel my age if I do this or that. Other than that, I'm good, or I'm pretty youthful, or that's it, or there's only a few things that make me feel my age. Is that a running bit in your own life, or is that completely fictional?
Well, it's probably a running bit in many of the people's lives here tonight. So in the novel, Jack says, I feel like I'm 35. That's the age that he feels like he is. And then he says, oh, except Wednesday mornings, the morning after ball hockey, when it feels like he's got somebody else's legs for the first several, hours. I can certainly speak to that with considerable authority. So he begins to enumerate this list of activities or incidents or items that remind him that, oh yeah, maybe I am 62 in the novel. So that was kind of fun to pull that together. I have a bruise, a wonderfully technicolor bruise under my arm here. I took a shot in the game last week. And when you get older, your bruises are so much more vivid and colorful, and they last longer. There's little shades of yellow, and it's used to be you just get a bruise and then it's gone in a few days. Not now. Anyway, so that was one of the items on the list, I believe. Technicolor bruises.
Yes, it was, but not autobiographical.
Not autobiographical
at all. Okay. So the characters, especially Jack and Callahan, for me, they really jumped off the page. I really cared for them. I want to know what's going to happen in the future. And I'm probably not the only reader that might wonder. So is there consideration, or is it too soon to continue their story at some point in the future?
That's a really good question. And it's funny, when I write a novel, the only time I ever thought that there would be a sequel was on my first novel, largely because I didn't know what I was doing. And that one seemed to do well enough. So I thought, why don't I just carry on this story? Why mess with it? So I hadn't actually thought of this being anything more than a standalone novel. But you're not the first who's mentioned what happens to them now. So it's possible. It won't be my 10th novel. I'm already well down the road on that one. But I honestly don't know what comes after that. People often ask me, you must have so many new ideas. No, I generally have one new idea that comes to me as I'm wrapping up the previous novel. Something will just appear.
Okay.
And I'll take some notes and write it down and then go back to finish the novel I'm working on. And I've never had more than one new idea coming out. So we'll see.
Okay.
It's not off the table.
Okay. As long as Jack and Callahan remain on the table, that's good enough for me for today, because I would absolutely love to know what happens in the future. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention one other considerable character in the novel, and that's music. The character absolutely references a couple of songs and writes a couple of songs. And I believe in the audiobook version, because I have the old school paper version, that you included a couple of songs, and wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about that, because it's pretty unique. And if we have time, would love to hear one.
Well, we can, yes. So I tend to write about pieces of my life, again, not in an autobiographical way, but things that I'm interested in, I like to write about. And I've never written about music or songwriting, and yet I've been writing songs since I was 17 years old when I first learned how to play a guitar. So it's been a huge part of my life, but it's been a very private part. I played in a band at university, which was really fun. And I was the original lead singer in the band, but my bandmates said, you know, we're a rock and roll band, we're playing Jethro Tull, and you come from the Anne Murray School of Singing. So we auditioned for a new lead singer. Are there any fans of the Sky Diggers in the room? I see a hand at the back. Sort of a cult Canadian band. Well, Andy Mays is a co-founder of the Sky Diggers, and Andy was the lead singer in our band when I was shunted to backup vocals. So Andy's is a good friend, and he's made a whole life out of his music. So I like to remind him that we gave him his start. So there are two original songs, as Deborah kind of mentioned, in the novel. One I wrote about 15 years ago. It's, in a way, I think of it, as it says in the novel, as a love song to the Ball Hockey League. It's called More Than the Game. And the second song was written 42 years ago. And I was at McMaster studying I have an engineering degree from McMaster. And I had just started dating this young woman, a fellow student. And this is in December. She went home after her exams to celebrate Christmas with her family, which is not uncommon. But I still had one more exam left, and I'd fallen pretty hard, and I was missing her terribly. And nothing fuels my songwriting like, you know, emotional angst. So I remember I don't remember writing all of my songs, but I remember writing this one quite vividly. I was in my on-campus apartment, sitting on my single bed. There was a full moon out. I could see the moon through the window, and there were clouds crossing it. And I had strung up Christmas lights in my window. And as I'm writing this song, kind of in the dark, I could see my reflection in the glass. And sometimes lyrics are right in front of you. And there's a lyric in the song, as winter clouds surround the moon and colored lights frame my thoughts of you. And it was just right there for me. But I've probably written 30 or 40 songs. Very few people have ever heard them. My brother has heard them, sometimes my wife. But I just play them for myself. Oh, by the way, that woman that I wrote that song about, we're celebrating our 36th wedding anniversary in about, actually today's the 10th?
Yes.
So 2 days from now, we're celebrating in Calgary when I'm at WordFest. That'll be our 36th anniversary. So I still play the song now and then for her. It was a real tradition in the beginning. I would play it for her on Christmas Eve every year until we had kids, and then that stopped. But so yes, we recorded the songs, which was terribly not embarrassing. It's not I'm not really a performer, but I recorded the songs, and for the first time in McClelland Stewart's history, and I think in Penguin Random House history, the original songs are laid into the audiobook right where they appear. So when the song comes up, instead of just reading the lyrics as you do in the novel, you get to hear me sing the song. But so we do have, we can listen to a song if there is an appetite for that. I may leave the room, but
Is there an appetite for that? Yes.
all right, so how about the 42-year-old love song? It's a Christmas song because I wrote it at Christmas. It's called Until the New Year because that's when she was coming back. So see if I can get this to work. Oh, sorry, let's end it. Here we go. Okay. The leaves were falling then, now snowflakes ride the wind, and Christmas carols fill the air as people bustle everywhere I go. Laughing children smile at me as they sit upon his knee, and winter clouds surround the moon as colored lights frame my thoughts of you. I know it can't be, but I wish that we could spend this time together, celebrating everything that comes along. My heart will be with you until the new year brings you back, and then we'll play it day by day, 'cause time is ours. On the street, school kids sing as skinny Santa's sleigh bells ring, and visions of you danced in my head on Christmas Eve. Some people say that I'm tied down again, but they don't know who we are. I can't tell you what you've done for me. I fly higher than before, but I wish that we could spend this time together, celebrating everything that comes along. My heart will be with you until the new year brings you back, and then we'll play it day by day, 'cause time is ours. Now you're at home, a million miles to phone, but you know where my feelings are. All my love at Christmas time for you. All my love at Christmas time for you.
There you go.
Not embarrassing at all to hear your own voice.
It's terrible.
It's got the admiration.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it is hard to, yeah. I don't know how they talked me into doing that, by the way, but
Well, it's pretty unique, I think, to be not only in the audiobook, but at a book launch to hear music. That's part of the book. I think that's pretty cool. And maybe just to end, because I know John probably has us doing something else pretty soon, but it's a very Canadian experience in the book as it relates to music, and you've incorporated a friend of yours with regards to the music in the book by the name of Jim Cuddy from Blue Rodeo. Yes, he's in the book. Did you want to tell us just a little bit about that? That's probably an apropos segue.
Jim Cuddy is the only real person in the book, with the exception of Hemingway and these references to them, but Jim's actually in the book. I've known Jim for a long time. We're not good friends or anything, but we played in the ball hockey league together.
There you go.
He lives in Riverdale, where in the community where we play ball hockey. And, I played on his team several times, and he was kind enough to give me a blurb for my second novel. So he liked the novel, so he knew about my writing life. And when I finished the manuscript for a new season, I emailed him and said, Jim, I've written this novel, you're actually in it. And here's how and why and where. And I sent him the manuscript and I said, look, it's very easy for me just to change the name and make it a fictitious Canadian songwriter. But I tried to capture you as I know you and as I know you are as a person. And how do you feel about me just leaving you in the book? And I sent him the manuscript all annotated where his appearances, because he makes 2 or 3 appearances and they're not big ones. It's relatively small in the grand scheme of things. And half an hour later, he emailed me back and said, I don't even have to read the manuscript. Go ahead, you can put me in it. Maybe ill-advised on his part. No, and I kind of knew he would do that because that's the kind of guy he is. So the Jim Cuddy you read about in the novel is actually the real Jim Cuddy. So.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that, Terry, because it was, you always have an aspect of Canadiana. That's just who you are. That's what you write about. And because it wasn't a fictional musician, it certainly begged the question about, obviously you got his legal permission and whatnot, but
yes,
yeah, he's an actual friend.
I archived his email in my files in case he ever comes back to me.
And he's not playing in the ball hockey game tonight?
No,
Okay.
His touring schedule got so heavy that the last 3 or 4 years, plus he's 67 or 68, I think now. So he is, no, I'm only 63, so I got several more years to go.
Yes.
But so he stopped playing a few years ago, but he often will just come by and watch and hang out and with the guys after the game, which is nice. So he is a very good guy. What you see is what you get with Jim.
Yeah, it was a lovely Canadian surprise within the story. Absolutely enjoyed it. Now, is there anything pressing on your mind that you wanted to sort of speak about before we probably segue into the next portion of the evening? Because that was sort of the extent of my mind meld and questions, because I don't want to give away, the whole plot, right? Neither do you.
No, you did very, very well. And I think you covered off the major themes that I tried to, when I think through how many different themes there are in the novel, it begs the question, why did you put so much stuff in this novel? And I have no idea why, but it just seemed to work. But I think we covered off almost everything. So I want to make sure you get a chance to discover the novel without us setting it up so much that you know what you're looking for in the second half. I don't want that. So I think we did very well, and you did very well.
Well, thank you, Terry. This is new to me, so I'm honored to be here.
It didn't show. Why are you mentioning?
Now, I'm wondering, John, what would you like us to do? We're going to refer to the boss right now.
Of course.
In terms of next.
The conversation was lovely. We did run a tiny bit late, so I'm afraid we don't have time for audience questions at the moment. But you are all welcome to certainly chat, say hello at the table, and ask any questions you might have of Terry at that point. I was wondering if either of you had any closing comments you might like to offer before I review the signing procedure.
Well, let me just thank Deborah for her great work. It's not easy to do that job and make it look so easy. And I'd like to thank John and the team at McNally Robinson for, it was so lovely to be back in this very special space. We cannot wait 10 years again or 12 years again, John. So thank you for the efforts, and thank you for coming out in such numbers. That means a lot. When you write a new book, it's very gratifying when people actually come out and say hello. And so thank you for being here tonight.
Thanks, Terry. Well, in terms of my closing, I guess I didn't totally ace it if we didn't leave room for audience questions. So that's on me. Yeah.
No, I prattled on too long. I warned them that I can go on, so sorry about that.
But thank you to Terry and John for making this easy. I much like Terry, I am a writer. I work in communications. That's my day job. So I know all about writing and being very comfortable behind a screen. I'm not usually in front of a microphone. I might be writing speeches for other people that are in front of the microphone. So it was a bit nerve-wracking, but in the end, it was just fun. So thank you.
No, thank you both so very much. It was just lovely to be able to sit back, listen to the conversation, and also have an opportunity to listen to some music as well. Coincidentally, just a few months before you visited us last time, Terry, Jim Cuddy actually played a concert just a little while beforehand in this very space. So we can confirm that he is truly the lovely person you were describing.
He is.
Great guy. So thank you all so very much for joining us here tonight. Thank you for your attention and your warmth. We're so grateful once again to McClelland Stewart for making sure that this evening could actually happen. We're so pleased that Deborah could join us to host this event as well. Thank you so much, Deborah. And just before I get you to applaud Terry one more time, I will just point out that we'll be moving him just to the signing table. So we'll
Transported.
Transported. Exactly. It sounds much more dramatic than it will actually be. And at that point, you'll be welcome to come and join us and get books signed and chat a little bit. We have copies of the new book behind our cash desk and at the signing table. We also have copies of some of Terry's previous books on a little display beside the signing table too. And if you're looking for a book, just flag down myself or any other bookseller and we'll find it for you. Please also do feel free to get a copy of the book signed before you pay for it. Just please do pay for the book before you leave. We're so very grateful to you all. Thank you so very much. And please join me one more time in acknowledging Terry Fallis.